Okay. So I am just, now we're going to do part 2. Here we go. Okay, and I'm going to do present. Move this way here, present. Okay. All right. Okay, so to continue on with understanding the contemporary situation and the rise of the new spirituality, this is part 2. The impact of the Enlightenment, that we need to, now that we've understood what religion is about, now we need to understand, well, okay, what's happened here? That there's been this shift away from traditional religiosity, right, traditional religious engagement, to the rise of the new spirituality, where more and more people are saying, I'm spiritual, not religious. So what happened to bring this about? Okay, so we need to put things in context here a bit more. So we now understand that, religion has been very powerful throughout human history. And the power of religion lies in its claim to bringing us the truth about life, about reality, about who we are, about how to live, what's right, what's wrong. Okay. And why does it have a claim to truth? Because the information that comes through religion does not represent mere human opinion, limited, fallible human opinion. The information that's brought to us through a religion is an information that came from a higher source, from a higher intelligence, something beyond the human mind. Okay. Either people had tuned in and had direct contact with God, so to speak, and got revelations and information, guidance, messages, or people were so in tune with the universe, like the Buddha becoming enlightened, and just so saw the truth about it all, about reality, the self, how it all works, okay, and became enlightened. So one way or another, the basic information that religion communicates to us is believed to come from a higher source, beyond mere limited human intelligence, but from a higher intelligence in one way or another. And so since it's coming from this higher source, okay, this then is what's given religion its power, that it knows what is the best way for us humans to live. And that is why religion then has always played a central role in every human society. It's basically been, and I like to put in here a little picture of a throne that religion could sit on. Okay, so religion is sitting on the throne in society, and then from there is directing all the different domains of life, governing the legal system in terms of what's right, what's wrong, the education system in terms of what we're all taught, politics around politics, and this is where often you get the state or politicians supporting religion, religion supporting the politics, and you get this marriage between politics and religion all the time. And then, of course, in the individual's family life in terms of how we basically live day to day. And, various other arms you could put in here. But basically, guiding and directing all spheres of life. Religion has always been in a position of power this way. Okay, of influence. And so you'd go to India, Hinduism is the dominant religious culture. In the Middle East, in the Muslim world, it's Islam that is dominant, right? In China, you'd have the influences of Buddhism and Taoism and Confucianism that had been in the past dominant. And of course, in Europe, it was Christianity, right? So you'll have that sort of a thing where religion was always dominant in any given civilization and society. And then we go back, say, to Egyptian civilization, that religion was dominant, etc. Okay, so this was the case with little change for thousands of years, for millennia. And generally, most religions existed in a rather insular fashion, isolated from each other, supported by the state powers, politics and religion mutually reinforcing each other. And so the authority of religion wasn't drastically challenged, but instead was supported and used by those in power. Okay, and that's where the authority of the state, the authority of religion often came together in a marriage of mutual support. However, things changed in the 20th century. Well, even earlier, actually, in the 1700s, as we'll see here. But today, we obviously live in this global village, and there's a lot more interdependency between nations for economic reasons and all kinds of things going on. So we don't have that same isolated situation. And we've had a whole move of increasing process of secularization in the modern world that began in Europe and has spread outward. And there's that pressure there should be a separation of religion from politics, from economics, from the legal system, okay? And even in ways to the education system, there's been that pressure. What's led the way was Europe, where it became consolidated earlier on. Okay, so the impact, as we see here, the impact, most importantly here, is that Western secularism is undermining religion's authority, okay, in societies, and has restricted, if not removed, the power of religion as being dominant in society. This is what's going on today. Because again, key thing is in the past, people would ask, how do we know what's true? And in the past, we know it's true because, we've got a divine revelation. We have these holy books that have this higher wisdom. And I just have faith and believe and follow the religion. That is then how I will know the truth. But these days, it is held that no, science and reason is what's going to bring us the truth. And this is what developed in the Enlightenment in Europe in the 1700s. Okay, where intellectuals increasingly were challenging the authority of religion in its claim to truth. And increasingly, intellectuals were holding to the idea that it is science and reason that is to bring us the truth, okay, and is to be given the authority over truth. And that is then what has led to the desecularization or the secularization in our society, where the sacred, the religious, has been removed from its position of power, okay, dethroned. And so we have a separation of church and state. Religion cannot dictate what happens politically, legally, in the education system being pushed on people, etc. Instead, we are committed to freedom. Freedom of thought, freedom of belief, and with that, freedom of religion. And no one can tell you that you have to be, Christian, Buddhist, Muslim. Okay, that's how the case is in the West. So the consequence of this separation of religion and state is, in the West, what happened is religious freedom. Let me move this down. Is that with the state no longer being supporting or endorsing any one religion, and with the state being committed to freedom, religious freedom, and any kind of freedom of thought, ideally, the result was that religious pluralism quickly became the norm. And that is what we find in our society, especially in the West, where we have everything next door. Okay, we have all religions are free to exist, to gain converts, to live as they would want to live. We are so committed to a freedom of religion. And so then that has led to the issue of what should I believe? So for someone then growing up in this situation, we no longer have one religion that's dominant, promoted in the education, supported by the state, and even legally sometimes supported, as it would be, say, in a lot of Middle Eastern countries, right, where Islam is what's dominant, and apostasy, to leave Islam, could actually cost you your life. In Sharia law, you're to be put to death. It's not allowed. You've got these legal restrictions. And so we don't have this at all. We have it's totally open, that all religions are valid, are free to exist. And so then that leads to a bit of a crisis. Don't I have that in there? The crisis of legitimation. Let me just backtrack. How do I backtrack? Oops. Oh, this is stuck. Yeah, crisis of legitimation. This has led to a crisis of legitimation. If there's so many religions here, and they all believe that they have the truth about it all, who should I believe? What should I believe? Can I actually believe that my religion or any one alone is the truth? People are finding that difficult, okay? And so this has created a bit of a crisis for a lot of people who think there's something spiritual, but what on earth should you believe? And so they then were left with having to make their own choices, create their own spirituality through their own personal choices as to what they would want to believe. And this is where I said in the very beginning of the last module that this is where we have that sort of a pick and choose smorgasbord approach, where people guided by their own personal preferences will create their own spirituality. And that's what we see here in terms of number 3, the creation of a contemporary type of folk religion. That's really what is going on out there. It's a type of what would be called folk religion. It's a religion of the people. It's grassroots level. It comes from the people, from the bottom up, not from the top down. It's highly eclectic, self-directed. And let me just move my whole thing up here. It's you're not confined to the dictates of any one religion, and this is what we see in terms of popular spirituality. So people are into kind of new age things, or Wicca, or shamanism, what have you, various forms of mysticism. It's a pick and choose thing. And then you'll have like Oprah on TV. She's just basically promoting this kind of broader spirituality that is more tied in, and we'll be going into all this down the road, okay? Personal growth, psychology, a blending of pop psychology and spirituality is the norm. And instead of one holy book, it's best-selling authors that people read, the books of Deepak Chopra, Wayne Dyer, Eckhart Tolle. People will read all kinds of books in terms of popular spirituality. That has become the holy books for today, okay? So this is a trend of what's happened. That is one response to the modern world. The other responses, religious responses, as you can see here, to modernity is number one there, the more liberal approach, which is to adapt and modernize religion. Okay, adapt the faith, integrate it with modern thought, science, and reason. And a lot of this has happened with Judaism and Christianity, specifically in the West, where you'll have more liberal Jews and Christians. Churches like the United Church, a lot of the Anglican, Jewish synagogues like Reform synagogues, they embody this more liberal approach where they give ultimate authority to science and reason. And as long as the faith can blend in and harmonize with science and reason, then that's what's accepted. But the ultimate authority is given to science and reason. Number two, those who reject modernity, often seeing it as an enemy, refusing to adapt, or, again, there's always a spectrum of, in-betweeners, right? Some they're more liberal, ultra-conservative, and those are kind of a little bit liberal, a little bit conservative. It's not so just simply 1, 2, 3. There's always a wider spectrum, okay? But anyways, but those who refuse to adapt and are hardcore committed, seeking to purify religion of modernist influences or Western influences, and they call for a return to the past, a return to traditional religion, back to the Quran, back to the Bible, kind of a fundamentalist approach. Okay, they reject modernity, and for them, it is the holy book is the ultimate authority, and it doesn't matter what science may say. It's like science is going to be wrong. Okay, and then of course you've got those that are in between, because again, well, what is science? Really, it shouldn't be necessarily a worldview. It is a method. Okay, and that has its own limitations in terms of, as a method, what kind of material subject matter can science address. So there doesn't necessarily have to be a conflict between science and religion at all, actually, but it gets complicated in terms of exactly what and where you draw those lines. Okay, in terms of what you all mean by science, if it's a theory versus a fact versus a method versus a belief system, these are the issues there. Okay, but anyways, hopefully I didn't muddle this up too much for you, but those are the three basic responses to modernity going on out there today. Either adapting or rejecting and going back to hardcore fundamentalists. And again, there are those who are kind of in between those two, and then contemporary new spirituality, which is sort of outside of that whole game altogether. And we'll go into that more down the road, definitely. Okay. So anyways, just be aware, though, another facet to this story in terms of understanding the recent, our contemporary context here in terms of religion, what's going on. Whoops. I didn't want to go that way. I want to go back. You know what? I think. Okay, whoops, there we go. I just want this to move down. Okay. The connection between religion and culture. Okay. And so, what is it that I have here? You see, all religions Well, not all. We have the major world religions. Okay, they're the traditional religions like Hinduism, Buddhism, Judaism, Islam, etc. Right? Those are the major world religions. There are only a few major world religions, and there's literally thousands upon thousands of smaller little sects and religious groups and small religions that you hardly even know about or hear about. But the major religions, they're called world religions because they have become so influential and dominant that in societies that they actually have birthed whole cultures around them. Okay, they've been just so influential on a larger scale, and that's why they're often called a world religion. And so they've got the big numbers involved, and so they then also have forged and shaped and had huge impact on larger societies and culture as well. And so then you get this connection between a religion that both reflects a culture and influences that larger culture. And so social cultural trends and religion kind of often would go hand in hand. And so what we're seeing today in terms of this new spirituality is that it's not just a weird new little group that showed up out there. End of story. It's like, no, there's way more to it. This new spirituality is also embedded in and a part of a larger new subculture. And that is key to really understand it. It's embedded and is a part of a larger subculture that has been birthed. Okay. Oops. So that's what's here, more to this story about the new spirituality. Is more than just the popping up of another new little weird little religion out there. It's is not just another new religious sect. It's much deeper than that, and it's a lot more than that. It's part of the birthing of a whole new subculture that is actually now in competition with the other two dominant subcultures in modern society. Okay, the Judeo-Christian or biblical tradition that has been foundational to Western society, okay, and Western civilization. Then coming out of the Enlightenment in the 1700s, that's given rise to secular or scientific humanism that has become dominant and actually what represents modernity in a lot of ways, right? That those two have always been kind of like in vain. That basically is often depicted as science versus religion, okay? And then sometimes too is liberal versus conservative, that kind of a link. But we now have a third and new subculture that wants to lead the future. And so there's a correlation between the different subcultures that support those responses, religious responses, and already intimated. So you've got the biblical Judeo-Christian as a religion that has birthed a subculture, okay? That's in the West. Now you'll find in other societies, they'll have, Islam has also its religious heritage and culture. Hinduism in India, well, it's kind of like the Indian culture and heritage of Hinduism that's embedded in it, right? You'll find that other societies will have their cultures that are associated with those religions, okay? But what's dominant, having global impact, is indeed the Western one, the biblical Christian one. And then the second is, of course, the secular scientific humanism. That's the basis for a lot of liberalism, or it's labeled the left, that came out of the Enlightenment. But then what arose as a third new subculture is out of the 1960s, the whole hippie movement out of the 60s, the counterculture. And that is very much tied in with and forms the basis and is linked in with the new spirituality, okay? And so it's these three that are in competition with each other in terms of where do we go in the future? Which one of these is going to direct future society, the culture of the future? Is it going to be Christianity here, okay, the biblical tradition, or secular humanism here in the middle that came out of the Enlightenment that's going to forge the way, or to the right here, namaste, right? The new spirituality that sees that all is one and all is divine. I mean, it's kind of a cheap cliche, but that is the nuts and bolts of it, is this holistic view of reality. Okay, we'll be talking more about all this here down the road. But these are the three main subcultures. And so, again, we will go into this more later, but just so you can kind of get the context of things. Let me move this up again here out of the way. In terms of understanding the counterculture of the 60s, right? This is a movement that really got kicked forth and came out of the social activism that started happening. And it began a bit in the 50s, the 1950s, with Martin Luther King and the civil rights movement. And from that, from the movement for civil rights, it expanded to the protesting of the Vietnam War, right, and all the anti-war protests that went on. And then the social activism expanded further to call for women's rights and the women's movement, and then gay rights, then animal rights, and then environmentalism, the whole green movement. All of this was going on in the 60s and 70s, right? This kind of social activism. And with this, what was happening here is that the hippies of the 60s, they were challenging mainstream culture, mainstream society, and its values. Right? And a key thing, as they're saying here, is that the problem with the both the secular subculture and the traditional religious subculture is they equally were guilty of having, in a sense, desacralized life. Now, they didn't say this blatantly, but this is the undertone. Because what they held is that the reason why we are exploiting the planet in terms of violating the planet, in terms of pollution and the environment, the reason why we're exploiting people in other countries for cheap labor, right, and having all our manufacturing plants over in the third world, dumping our waste in third world countries, doing all of that just because it's all about profit. Right? And they're basically saying that the secular kind of approach, the materialist philosophy of secular humanism that says all there is to reality is this material world. And if that is your philosophy, then your top value is materialism as a philosophy, to get rich, to make money. The bottom line is profit. Okay. And so it's always a cost benefit analysis. Like, gee, if I can get these goods made over in China or Taiwan or India for $5 instead of for $20 in America, well, hey, I'm going to do that. All right. So it's where money is the key drive in terms of the whole capitalist system, so to speak, that leads to exploitation of the environment, exploitation of people. And the value system is just about making the money. It basically has, as a belief system, removed the sense of the sacredness of life, that the planet should be seen as something sacred, the environment as holy and sacred, okay, not to be exploited, that other people should be seen as holy and sacred. And so then that comes into the political arena. We should not go and fight the communists over in Vietnam. I mean, allow people the freedom of their political systems. Why are the communists bad and the Western democracy is good? So we have these kind of polarizations and that we go to war over. Okay, in terms of politics. And then we have holy wars, that our religion is right, yours is wrong, and we have our holy wars. And so they're basically saying that these acts of violence and political upheaval and conflict, right, is all rooted in the belief that others are of not equal value to us. That not all people are of equal value, right? And we need to respect that value. And it even goes to, again, the postmodernist idea that all belief systems are equally valid and of value. I mean, that definitely can be debated and needs to be debated, but that idea is there as well. So there's a sense that if we continue on the way that we're going in terms of feeling that war is justified, religious conflict is justified, exploitation of people and the planet and animals is all justified, all right, that we're going to end up destroying ourselves, right? We're going to end up destroying the planet and all of us in it. And so they held that what we need is a spiritual vision that can bring about the value that all of life is holy, is sacred, is to be honored and respected. And therefore we need a spiritual framework for that. All right. We need to re-sacralize, bring in the sense of the sacred, the holy back into everyday life at all levels and all ways. And if we do that, then there's hope that we can survive here and make things work on planet Earth. And so That's the key thing that was going on behind the counterculture. That's why this new spirituality is so linked in with the social activism of the 60s. They kind of go hand in hand here. And why they also felt that they had to create a new spirituality in contrast to traditional religion. They held that the problem with traditional religion is that they so focused that the spiritual, that which is holy, is not here on earth, but up there in heaven. Where is God? Oh, up there in heaven. What is the focus of life? Oh, to make sure that when my soul leaves this body, it gets up there in heaven. And if this world goes to pot, who cares? As long as my soul gets up there into heaven, that's the bottom line. That's all that matters, okay? And so in their mind, they're thinking that just as the atheists and the materialists have removed the sacred, the holy from this life, so too have the traditional religions. They so focus on the spiritual as being in another world, way up there somewhere, okay? And the whole goal is to have this soul leave this body, renounce all material desires and leave this body and get up there into this other realm, this heavenly place, that is the end goal and purpose of life, right? That is just as problematic for them. So that's why what develops out of the counterculture is a whole new model of reality, a paradigm, which we'll be looking at, that brings the sense of the holy, the sacred, the spiritual back into this world of everyday living. That all is sacred and holy because everything is divine. God, so to speak, is not up there in some heaven, but in here, in the earth, in the planet, in the animals, in me, in you. That all of this world is a manifestation of the divine. All right. And it's for us to wake up to that truth, to wake up to the reality that God is in you and in me and in this earth and in all living beings and in all of life. That is the perspective that needs to be embraced. That is basically what the new spirituality advocates, with a lot of diversity within it, but that's kind of the basic thrust of it. And that is the kind of view of reality that we need in order to ensure our ongoing existence and to not just survive, but thrive. Okay. So hopefully that made some sense to you all on that. Okay. Okay, so to continue on here. So this new spirituality, as I mentioned earlier, is also known as the New Age movement or the New Consciousness. As I said, it's largely a form of contemporary folk religion or popular religion that exists outside of traditional religion, mainstream, established, institutionalized religion. Okay. However, it is also, okay, it's so important, it's also a larger social cultural movement that goes beyond just being another little religious group over here. This is what sets it apart from other religions, new and old, and makes it also more difficult to delineate. Okay, it's more difficult to talk about this stuff than it is your typical religious group. You could, pick something like the Church of Scientology. Okay, it's a particular little group. Well, I can look it up in a phone book. There's the founder, L. Ron Hubbard. There are the books that he wrote, and I could kind of sum up his teachings and his beliefs and the practices and how much money they charge to do their program. And that there are all these famous movie stars like Tom Cruise, and others, John Travolta, who are members of Scientology, right? And it's this particular little new religious group. And there's a whole bunch of these, okay? But they're just, different little religious groups here. And they're easy to describe, to kind of put together a little paper on it, 5 to 6 pages, summarize what their beliefs are and where they began, how they're organized, and yada, yada, yada. Okay? We're not dealing with that here. This is something very difficult. It is so beyond any one group, any one person, any one teacher. Okay, let me just go on to the next slide because I think I got that here. Yeah, this is not just another little new religion. Okay, because most religions, they have a founder, a key figure, like an L. Ron Hubbard. who started it, or a Jesus, or a Muhammad, or a Buddha, or a Guru Nanak. Okay, there's usually a founder, number one. Number two, most religions have a holy book. Aha, that if I want to find out what they believe, well, here's the Bible, here's the Quran. Okay, like they have their holy books. They also have organizations. So I could look them up in the phone book and see, geez, I want to go to a church, or I want to go to a Buddhist temple. I can look it up in the phone book, or Google it online, and there's an address, and there'll be a building there, and they'll have services that take place. And then there'll be leaders. Okay. This is the leader of this group. Okay. This is the bishop. This is the priest. And then, you have a whole organization there. And then I can find out, they'll maybe even have a pamphlet. This is what we believe. We believe A, B, C, D, ta-da. And it's all neatly packaged for us, right? That's the norm when we're dealing with religion. But we don't have this here. In this new spirituality, all right, there is no one founder. There's nobody who started this. There is no one holy book that it is its basis, all right, that I can point to that if you read this book, you've got what these people believe, right? There's no one organization that's running it. There's no one leader who's responsible for it, okay? There's no universally accepted little package of beliefs that they hold to, like a creed system of some kind or a set of doctrines, right? There's no specific holy places where these people meet. There are places where they hang out for sure. You go down to Sedona, it's like, oh, the energy in this place, all these vortexes of energy is like, woo, it's sort of a little bit of a mecca for a lot of New Agers. But it's not like this is the New Age temple, that all New Age believers go to. You don't find that. Okay. So instead, what we've got here, it is a grassroots movement that came out of the counterculture, right? And it has many leaders, many holy books of influence that people look to for inspiration and guidance that are part of it. There are many organizations, many teachings, and some of these teachings are in conflict with each other, okay? This is what makes it so tricky at times. But yet, there's something that ties them all together. There's something that even though there's all this diversity, there's something that brings them together so that they're a part of this movement. So it's better to think of it as a movement. Movement is just a broader kind of network. Okay, that can include within it, many little groups and teachers and leaders within it, but they all kind of link together in a movement. This is what we've got here. And what ties them together, how they're unified, is in their desire to promote this spiritual vision of cosmic unity, of oneness, that there's an interconnection, a oneness, a unity to all of life. And that oneness, the basis of that unity, the basis of the oneness of all of life is divine, is God, so to speak, okay, is divinity itself. And that therefore, that then births the value that's so important here, that all of life is sacred. Okay, this is a key thing, right? This is what's going on here. This is what it's about. Okay, so hopefully that all made some sense. I'm not going to do this here now. I've got this slide here, but I think I'm going to come back to this in the future because there's a lot involved here with this. Okay, because as a movement, it also is calling for what's called a paradigm shift, that we need a different perspective, a different way of looking at reality, out there. What is the nature of reality, how it works? Number one. And number two, a different way of knowing. How can I know this reality? How do I tune into reality? So it's both a new metaphysical belief system, model of reality, and also a new epistemology, a different way of knowing is what's advocated here. And this slide here sums some of this up, and it's huge. I'd rather talk about this down the road, okay, because there's a lot to unpack here, and I'm just doing too much here today for you guys to all absorb. But this is what's going on here. That's why this is really important. This is beyond just, studying another new weird little religion. It's like this way beyond this. We're talking here about a shift in how humanity experiences and perceives reality at such a radical core. It is almost like a shift in human understanding and experience that will be equivalent to the shift from being a hunter-gatherer kind of people to the birthing of the first civilizations. We're undergoing a huge shift here. That is, I can't even overstate how important this is, all right? And there's a lot of resistance to it, and because it's working with a new model of reality that's primarily an energy model of reality, that everything's about energy. So that we'll be talking about it down the road, there's going to be energy medicine, energy psychology, quantum biology. The implications of quantum physics are profound. And yet, in terms of mainstream society, we don't even want to go there. The implication is so profound, we don't know yet how to handle it and what to do with it. Okay? So it's not really being brought into the education system. We're still teaching predominantly a lot of what is being taught, even at university level, is outdated in almost every way. Okay, so much is outdated. We're stuck in old institutions, old ways of thinking, and old paradigms. Believe me, it's a real issue. But what's a part of this movement are people with PhDs in every field, in every area, that are on the leading edge of a profound shift in how we perceive and experience reality and where we're going in the future. And this is what this is about. That this new spiritual is contextualized and rooted in this larger, huge cultural paradigm shift that we're in the process of. And it's going to take quite a while for it to really materialize, but it's in the process. Okay. Whew, so there's a lot involved. But for us in this course here, what we're all doing here is this new paradigm shift that's happening and the rise of this new subculture of the new spirituality. It's going to have some roots. Yes, I talked about the competing subcultures of the biblical Christian tradition, the secular humanist tradition, right? And then there's the new spirituality. But the new spirit it's going to be drawing from a more ancient subculture that I could call the magical subculture, the magical view of reality in the ancient world. And that this subculture that is ancient, it's shamanic, it's rooted in what we would often call the occult or magic of ancient times. And when Christianity became the dominant religion, this whole tradition went underground. It kind of went underground, percolating over the centuries, showing up here and there and bits, Gnosticism, alchemy, the Hermetic tradition, secret societies and all that would kind of pop up its head here and there. And then it started to show up more and more, and a lot of the new spirituality draws from this tradition, is more connected with it, okay? And it's rooted in human experience, that there are hidden forces, hidden energies, hidden beings. It's profoundly religious in that sense of how I described religion earlier, okay? And the word occult simply means that which is hidden, that's not obviously visible to you, but it's behind the scenes. That's what the word occult means. And that is what this new spirituality taps into, is getting connected again to those spiritual forces, intelligences, and how to receive guidance from them, how to access their powers and energies to have a more successful life here and now. Okay, making the magic real. Okay, bringing the magic back. That's a lot of what's going on here. And this is where we'll begin our next module, is looking at the magical view of reality in the ancient world, what are the key beliefs and concepts and practices, okay? And just hinting at it a bit here is that that reality is interconnected in terms of energy and consciousness, and all of life is grounded in this energetic consciousness matrix, and is possible to direct and shift reality in a way that can appear to defy classical physics, Newtonian physics, okay, and physical causation. That magic and prayer can work. Miracles can happen. All right. It's a lot of what's about. So exciting, juicy stuff, I think, and I hope you do too. But that is where we will pick up from this next time. All right? Okay.